Oh, got it. Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to my channel, the one that I continue to kind of describe as work in progress and always evolving. Well, today is another special day for me because I'm going to have the second interview, part 2, with Ray Foster, and where we're going to discuss another part of his growth and what his journey's been like. Just to remind the viewers, if you saw part 1 and want to go back to it, or if you didn't see part 1, you don't want to miss it. So I'm going to put the link below to that particular conversation that we had. And just to kind of have segue into where we're going, the first conversation we had was about how Ray actually went from lost 90 pounds and gave up meds. It was not, this is not a conversation about how to lose weight or give up meds. It literally happened through his process of actually, well, getting to know who his true self was and giving up the old identity. It's an amazing story. So we're going to continue today. So you're going to love it. Keep watching it. And here we go. So Ray, so welcome.
Thank you kindly. Your welcomes are always inviting and makes you feel all warm on the inside.
Oh, that's good to hear.
And at the same time, I want to avoid it because I don't want too much of it, because then that's the self-glory part of it. And it's not about me, it's about all of us, but it is about me. So that's the trick.
Yeah, we're going to share about your journey. So what you and I have talked about is, going to part of your childhood, because I think so most of us, if not all of us, this is where oftentimes certain behaviors begin, and particularly in children, when we're not feeling safe in our environment, then we have to create a behavior or a way to survive. So can you take us through that time that you were in?
Yeah, I mean, the funny part about childhood for me and how I see it now and looking back, it's so prevalent to who I am now that I can look at it with the lessons learned currently and not look at it as still the pain from then. So some of the things that I went through was like, I am the epitome of the child born from a young mother. So my mom was 18 when she had me, and I have an older brother that's 2 years older than me. So growing up with a mother that already has 2 kids at 18 and a dad that was 17 when I was born. So that shows you how young they were in having kids, and me thinking about my daughters now at 20 and 21, I couldn't imagine having a kid at that age and at that time also in the 60s and growing up like that now. So to see some of those things for me, how that played out with my dad not being there, with my mom remarrying, being in an abusive relationship, and seeing these things, it made me internalize a lot of life and how I saw it, and realizing that people really do come in your life for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. So it gave me that, instilled in me in a way that I didn't know. But when I left the house, outside influenced me more than my house influenced me, because I got to see different actions now. So with that also, they created their own situations around me that I also had to deal with. And learning more to not talk or not be forthright with how I felt because of the repercussions that would happen based on me telling the truth to somebody or expressing how I truly felt about something. I learned to shut that part of me down and learn to pay attention to who and where I could speak. And it became so innate that I didn't realize that I was doing it until I turned 43, and I realized that that's what I was doing to myself. And all of those actions that were coming out of me because of me shutting myself down, man, it just made me realize that it's parts of life that if we don't have control over, or we're not consciously aware of it, we leave that part of our control to our subconscious because it's a program now. I program myself to be in environments where I'm not too comfortable, but I program myself so well I interacted in those environments. And maybe that is a byproduct of being in the service, that I had to step past myself for that point to be in an environment where I have to be inclusive of everyone around me, because everybody has my life in their hands in this moment.
So let me just add one piece. You're talking about the military, right?
Ma'am.
Yeah. So when this is where you, when did you join the military?
So I joined the Army. I joined the Army infantry in 1996. So I joined the service in 96. I think I was 18 or 19. Mm-hmm. So straight out of high school, not straight out of high school, because I went to college for a couple semesters and I was like, this is not for me in the moment.
Really?
Yes. In the moment, it just felt like again, we're going back to that environment that I grew up in. So in that environment, I felt like I didn't have a lot of help. I didn't have like getting back and forth to school, getting back and forth to work, not having a car, walking and driving, being in Chicago where the weather changes, that changes a lot of things. So I just felt so isolated and by myself. I joined the service.
So that was your motivation at the time to join the service. Wow. Wow.
So I found out my father was in the Army and then my uncle was in the service. So I found out a lot of my family members had been in the service before. So it gave me a bit of solace to join. And in me joining that, technically I was running away from my responsibilities at home, kind of. But I was doing something that I thought at the time that I needed that would help me expand who I was and to continue the growth of who I am.
What were your responsibilities at home during that time? What did you consider as an 18-year-old kid that you had to be responsible for?
Man, because with me being the second oldest child, like I have younger siblings. So my siblings behind me and helping with that, or, now this is the part where we come into culture or ethnicity, because growing up in a Black household, you are taught at a certain age, you need to get a job and you need to help with some of the bills in the house. Mm. So some of that and things around and just trying to help to be of service to my mother, who was at this time a single parent.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So yeah, my mom was single by this time. So it was like a whole bunch of stuff going on in the family. So it was a lot at the time to deal with. So it was just one of those things that I just joined the service.
Understand. Well, what a heavy burden, though, for a young man, after all, where you went through your stepfather's violence and behavior and had to shut down, and then come out of that was feeling, and certainly it's understandable how you would feel, but that impacts also, don't you think?
Yes.
That your life was like, was there guilt involved when you went to the service?
Oh my goodness. So just thinking about the guilt and the shame of all of it, because you start owning some of this for yourself, and you think you are the reason or you are the cause as to why some of these things are happening. And then when you hear some of the stories and then it actually is true that because my mother already had 2 children going into this new relationship, now she has another child from this relationship, it already created its own tension, because now we're not being treated the same and it's noticeable. So I think in a sense that was my mother also defending her other 2 children or trying to step forward and be there for them, while also still being respectful of the environment that she was in. So I know, and I'm saying this, even then, I want to say my mom was just 20, 25, which is still crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Just now to even apply my knowing to that now is her at 25 and going through all of this. So I can only imagine, man, of again, looking at my daughters, I couldn't see some of these things being their life. However, I know from those environments that I was in, it was playing on me. And with that, doing that, it was taking an effect without me realizing it then.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'm sorry that I interrupted you with the service, but I kind of wanted to go back and fill in some of my questions
Go for it.
on that. But so it's interesting because I've never been in the service or military, but I have my perception of it really is probably movies. I don't have relatives or anything that have been. So that's where you see kind of the demands of that hierarchy. It's brutal. Is I don't know, is that true when you're actually,
absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely. Yes, your rank, your position, and your title and your authority matters absolutely there.
Wow.
You address everyone by their rank. No matter if they are under you, you still address them by their rank because it's teaching you the discipline of how you interact with people and kind of you giving people authority for something in that moment before their time of service. So it is teaching you that authority, which in that moment also, I didn't know that my contention with authority was the way it was either. But I was absolutely fine in the service because, again, that trait that I learned in childhood is how to adapt and be silent, even in areas where I'm not comfortable or I'm not too forthright. I can still survive because I learned that not knowing that's what I was doing.
Amazing. How I think, and I want to say, I think so many of us have had very, not necessarily the same exact story or background, but we have been in unsafe environments. And those can vary in all kinds of ways. I've mentioned before on my videos, I had a emotionally abusive mother. So that, but the end result's the same because we create a behavior and then we don't even realize it, but at the time it was very important for us to feel somewhat safe, right? And then as we grow into young adults, we continue this, and some of us probably continue it through our entire life until one day you get that wake-up call like you did.
Man, that wake-up call. And you said something too. Even despite everything my mother was going through, right? I only remember one time my mother disciplining me once. So despite the environment, like I still wasn't being hit on or did all this too because my adapting skills were that up to par where my brothers weren't the same treatment. So I got to be the middle ground to see how they were being treated, the older brother and the younger brother. So I got to see that. And I got to see that they weren't being treated just because they were being treated bad. They were also evoking things out of in their reaction to what was going on in the environment. So I started to see, and now as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about this. So it's right now happening that's what was going on. It was like because of my adaptability for that matter, and my brother's stronger personalities, that they they were met with more of the resistance than I was. Because in that moment, I was able to, let's say, float under the radar.
You're right.
Yes. And then, so that also tied back to the service part. So going into service and being under all that authority and everything like that, it helped me to also see everyone is their own authority technically. Because once you start being promoted and you doing these things in the service, you get promoted based on you. It's no one else. It's based on how much you study, how dedicated you are, and how focused you could be. So that also taught me another thing as to how to focus and what to focus on. Now, in the service, none of those things were quite interesting to focus on, but you do it because for me, I was in infantry, so I was on a tank. So it gave me so many cool things to learn about that helped me also develop more and more traits about it and see that I do have interests that are not commonplace interests for that point.
What do you mean by that?
Where just some of the things that I'm into, like I like racing cars, I like taking computers apart, I like learning how things work. So me learning how things work was quite interesting in the Army and in the service because I got to learn how these guns break down. I got to learn how the tank does what it does, how to take it apart, how to move some of these things around. So I got to be the person that I can go as deep with my rabbit holes as I wanted to because I had that time to do it.
And it sounds like that was kind of a new, what do I want to say? A new you for you. You were discovering something about you that you wouldn't have necessarily had happen in your childhood, for instance.
Not at all.
Right, right, right.
So that also opened me up to being more involved with people around me to a point. I'm still, I wouldn't consider myself an introvert, but I also would because my first preference is to always be by myself. However, I like to be in relationships. I like to be sociable. I like to talk. I like to be engaged. However, I don't want to be engaged with like small talk or things that have no relevance to anything. So I don't engage like that. So sometimes I do seem aloof to others or disassociated with others. And I realize that is a trait of mine that sometimes I show and sometimes I am well with interacting with people. So it is things about me that I'm realizing now still at 45. And it's still unfolding and growing and learning.
And it'll always be, don't you think?
Absolutely.
You don't want to stop learning.
I heard something yesterday. It said if you got all the food you were going to eat for the rest of your life right now, you would not want that food because it would be too much for you. So we learn and grow by bite-sized pieces, and you get to decide how big the piece is for you.
Exactly, exactly. So in terms of how often, well, let me ask it this way. As you went through this process, and we talked mostly about that process in our part one conversation, but in going through the process, and you've kind of been through that for a couple of years now, or yes, close to a couple of years, but have you still felt that you can all of a sudden catch yourself? I know this happens for me. I think how much more do I need to learn about, in my case, people pleasing? And I didn't realize the depth of it or the width of it. Maybe that's it. Like, how broad is this? And what haven't I seen? And it'll come up in such a oftentimes subtle way, catches me off guard because I thought I dealt with it, but it isn't so like black and white like that, or narrow, or I don't know what to call it. Have you had experiences like that in this time of where you really got the wake up call, and then you're living beyond that though?
Yes, I think even to this point, I still do it. I don't want to say suffer it. I still do it occasionally. It's more of a feel or judgment. And let me say this first. So I look at people pleasing as essentially giving my authority away or giving the power that I have away. And I say that by, if I ask you your opinion and I value your opinion more than my own opinion, to me, I'm giving you my power. So if I'm going to follow your words to the T, then okay. But if most people, when they give an opinion, the opinion that they give is based on the information that they have as they grew up. So the way they were raised, or however you want to use it, it's based on them. So it's missing some key details based on who's talking and what you're sharing. So I also look at that as gossiping and so many things that we look at as people pleasing. You talk to people to find reference to things and to have people agree with you and do those. So I noticed I did it a lot in the service because I felt like you almost sign your authority away when you join because you are listening to the command of someone else at all times, because in the service, you are essentially there 24/7. At when the time you're out of the service is when that contract says you're done. So other than that, whatever time they call, whatever time you're summoned, you have to show up and you have to be there. It's no reason. You can be out at the club drinking. If they call, guess where you need to be in an hour, back on that base. So it was different being in it like that, where I knew what I was doing when I joined. So when I came home from the service, it was just different. Like do you say I met my wife, or not really met my wife? When I came home for the service, I knew my wife because we went to high school together. Just never married her. We never dated before I came home from the service. So me dating her, or started to date her, I mean, it's a couple stories in the middle of there that probably need some catching up to, and I could fill in those as well. But I noticed that I was doing a lot of that. Is how I see the world being. I see other people not seeing it the way I envision, or I see the world. So with me seeing it that way, I keep my opinion to myself as to not sway or seem like I'm rocking anyone else's boat by sharing my point of view. And I realized that sharing my point of view sometimes lately in this last few years have led to contention, if I'm saying that correctly. It leads to people feeling like I'm trying to control their view, even though all I'm doing is sharing my point of view, being vulnerable. So to me, all of those things, I'm trying to see if that is a form of the people pleasing, because I'm giving a part of me and not holding the authority that I have and that I am. And I'm giving it to somebody else because I value their position, or I value how long they've been doing something. So in that way, the people pleasing part, I gave my authority away to my wife in a sense of church or religion. I grew up going to church my whole life, not really in it, but just there. Understanding everything that's going on, but not all the way relating to it because some things didn't make sense. So when I ask questions and to be ridiculed or something for the question you're asking for clarity, it just caused certain things. And then until I realized I was giving my power away by relying, thinking somebody else had more information or knew better because they were in something longer, and not trusting that source that's within me, then I realized I realized I was giving my power away. And it made me just reflect again and see, why did I do that?
And so is that kind of, communication is complex.
Yes.
For the human species, for sure. And particularly when we have had that behavior, or the program or the conditioning that we grew up with, it becomes like a part of us that we don't even see happening a lot of times. But in that, I think it's a balancing act, because I think because those of us that have this people pleasing or giving our power away or authority away, there's a kind of a confusion that can set in, because we want to then get so focused in a way on, I don't want to give my power away. And if something kind of, triggers in a situation with anyone, it doesn't have to be a wife or a husband, or, just could be anywhere, right, and you notice it, then I guess for me, I've noticed if I can allow my intuition to show up at that moment, and it can happen at that moment, like it's just something doesn't feel right, then sometimes I can balance it out, but other times I have to kind of let it happen.
Yeah.
And then maybe a week later, or who knows, years later, I go, oh,
aha.
Yeah, has that happened for you?
Absolutely. It's happening as I'm speaking to you. I'm like, I'm getting this right now. it goes to that though. You have to, in order to know, you have to admit to yourself you don't know. So you have to give yourself the space and the understanding to say, if I don't know something, I'm giving myself the opportunity to know it and learn it. But if I come to the table feeling like I have the answer to everything, then how can I receive something different? I'll receive what I'm expecting. So in our conditioning, in our understanding, in the things that we are all raised to understand, we all lend back to the same conditioning. So in that, it points it back to us again. So until we're ready to take the onus of it and understand that we have power within us, and it's our essentially this. I wrote this. We've lied to ourselves for so long that we lied to other people for so long, and we didn't realize we were lying to ourselves, lying to them. So we were hurting ourselves more. So now it's like we're needing to retrust and relearn our own intuition, how we feel about things that arrive, how we feel about things around us. We have to start trusting that feeling and opening our hearts back up to the world, because in our conditioning, in our childhood, when all these things going on around us, all the violence, all the parents not expressing that love and compassion and empathy for their children embodied these things, and it manifests into what we are witnessing going on around us now. So they couldn't control how it manifested. We just know it did. And now from that did, we get the choice to then come back and change some of those choices. So now I get to own how I have been, how the things are around me, and then to see myself anew and then be who I expect. I need to be it first. And in order for me to be it, I have to know who I am and know how I serve and know how I serve the people around me. And the way I serve is by my unique point of view and the way I see the world. And the way I see the world, I get to share with people like you and people who come around, and just I feel so connected to you. It's so interesting. Like, oh my goodness, like we were related in another lifetime or something. It's so inviting to sit and talk to you. So it feels like I feel like I'm gaining family that I haven't seen in a while. And it feels so reassuring that each day just shows me more and more to trust myself more and more, and to trust that feeling that's in me more and more, that's leading me to the people that I need to be around, or the people that I need to be in contact with, because each of us are to help for somebody else.
True. And I love what you said about coming to the table, so to speak, without knowing, without having to have a particular idea of the way it should be, or the way our thoughts, if we can open up, and that's not easy to do. It's not, right? I mean, it's not, because we all have this stuff in us, right? Can get triggered. But when you can actually get to that honesty within ourselves, I think for me, that's what it is. When I can get to that place and not beat myself up for making a mistake or whatever it is, then that is where I can be open. And that probably is where the communication is clearer, you know? When we're coming from I don't know place, I don't know the answer. I don't feel, and I don't have to judge another person by what they're expressing. It's just a conversation in a way. It's just each person trying to best as they can communicate.
Yes.
Whatever it is that is trying to happen in that moment. And like I said, I don't think it's an easy thing for most of us that have, who doesn't grow up with behaviors that happen because of childhood? I'd like to meet that person.
I would like to meet that person too, and say like, man, what did you develop because you didn't have any of those issues? So sometimes the issue should be the thing that makes us the best version of anything, because from that issue, we got to develop and see, I didn't like that. I get to change that sooner. You just said that. We don't know some of these things come up until they come up. So when they come up, if we are already prepared for certain things coming up, then because we're starting to trust that inside knowing, that inside knowing gives you the solace. The inside is all, you say the judgment. If we see judgment in people, or we see it around us and ourselves, we only judge by the eyes we see with. Because I see certain things you do, and the conditioning and understanding that's good and bad, or right or wrong. And the minute I apply that to anybody else, now I'm in the wrong, because I'm judging somebody else's actions, when every one of us has that same source within us. And that same source within us is displaying itself through that person. So I can't judge how somebody else is living, because they need that in order for them to grow, in order for something around them to grow. So count it all joy. And I feel like the spiritual thing is just dots being connected back to the truest self of us, opening up to the consciousness of who we are.
And so I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I think what is an important thing to point out here is that also we're not becoming doormats.
No.
Just by saying everybody's got their place, and they're and this is all true. I totally agree that people come from where they can come. But if there's a type of behavior that is disrespectful to me, or any type of behavior that is kind of what I like, do I have to give in and become a doormat, so to speak? And I think this is where people get mixed up. I have, for sure, where I got my people pleasing thing, like, oh, maybe I need to kind of back up. And then what happens is it's like a tsunami of this person's wanting to be like wanting me to be the doormat. That makes them feel better. So, and it's a fine line for those of us, I think, that have been in this situation. But I think that's something that we need to be careful of, and observe ourselves in that. So it's like a balancing act by accepting others. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it helps all of us, and goes to what you're saying, not a doormat to where I'm just accepting anything from anybody. No, because now I can distance myself from that situation. I can distance myself from that person, and I can express the trueness of my heart to that person, because my heart is open to that person, not in blaming or shaming or anything, because I want the elevation for me and the people around me. Like, I want us all to be able to socialize and gather and be able to express our truth to one another, because that helps all of us develop more, and it helps all of us develop to where we have the neighborhoods and the environments that we want. So me not being a doormat is me being able to share with you my truth. Now, if your actions warrant the rage that's in me, don't think because this spiritual walk is there that there's no rage, because we all still have anger as well. And anger is also good. We don't need to run from any of our emotions. They all play a part in letting us know where we stand and where we need some more development.
So I think that is a beautiful note, because we're running out of time. It goes so fast. To close on, though, I think that what you just said is absolutely kind of pulls it together into what we're trying to communicate here. And hopefully this has helped someone, So, Ray, thank you so much. I've so appreciated the time and your information that you can give us. It's been absolutely awesome. And again, I want to remind our viewers, look below this video and you'll get to part 1. It's well worth it. And we hope you enjoyed part 2. And again, thank you so much, Ray, for your time and your conversation.
Thank you. I also wanted to just say thank you. You encouraged me to start my channel.
Yay. I'll put, you know what, we're running out of time, but I'll put the that below when you start it.
Yes,
Okay?
ma'am. Thank you.
All righty. Thanks.
Have a great day.